Welcome back to the Rance Retrospective. It has been a while. Rance 2 is considered by many to be one of the weaker entries in the series. Possibly the worst depending on who you ask. It's like the Final Fantasy II or Dragon Quest II of Rance. Today on the Rance Retrospective, we'll be doing a deep dive into Rebellious Maidens and why it has garnered such a reputation. What was it trying to accomplish, and how well does it work as a follow-up to Quest for Hikari? Do know that this video will cover the original Rance 2 and the remake in depth, spoiling everything. If you haven't played the game, then I'll advise doing so before watching further. While Quest for Hikari didn't sell gangbusters, it was a moderate success for an eroge debut title. Work on a sequel began not long after finishing it, allegedly not because of any outside demand for any continuation, but rather because of a shared enthusiasm between Tada and Yukimi about the idea. Rance 2, The Rebellious Maidens, was released in June of 1990, the year after the first game. Of course, people are likely more familiar with the remake, Rance 02, which came bundled with 01 in the English version. The thing is, Rance 2 technically has 4 different versions. The original, 02, Kai, and Kai Kai. 02 was originally included in Alisoft 2010, a collection of small Alisoft projects and extras. It predates Rance 01 by 4 years and is obviously smaller in scope. It's not a full, from-the-ground-up reimagining like 01. It's more akin to an HD remaster. Exact same gameplay and script, but with new art. Kai came out sometime later, which overhauled the script to give characters a bit more personality, and made them more in line with later games. The overall plot is essentially the same, but the new script adds fun characterization that was lacking in the original. The English release allows you to choose between the original 02 or Kai. I always recommend playing Kai. Finally, Kai Kai is the final updated version of 02 that further tweaks the script and gameplay somewhat. This version was never officially translated to English. Unlike the last video where I talked about the original and remake separately, here I'll be talking about the two interchangeably, because the differences are minor, but noting any interesting changes when they come up. The cover for the game is just as fascinating as Quest for Hikari. It features Nagi Suragaro, who, much like Tomato, is not actually in the game itself. Nagi doesn't make her first real appearance in the series until Kichiko, 5 games later if you count 4.1 and 4.2, and 6 years after the release of Rance 2. This may lead one to question why she's on the cover at all, but that starts to make some sense if you know about her character and her relationship with Shizuka. I assume that there might have been some plans to include Nagi in the game at some point, either as an antagonist or maybe as one of the Rebellious Maidens. Perhaps she wasn't supposed to appear at all, and this was just a way of teasing a character that would be important in the future. It's a mystery. Regardless, showing that Nagi was planned this far back is interesting. It makes one wonder how many ideas for the future they had at this point. The story starts with our hero Rance and his slave Sil out on another adventure when they stumble across the town of Custard, which has been sunken underground after a battle between 4 major apprentices and their master, Ragus. This battle is seen in the intro cinematic when you start the game. I quite like this intro cinematic. It feels like something out of an old Ys game. It introduces all the witches of Custard, also showing bits of the relationship with Ragus and the battle that led to Custard sinking underground. I think it sets the tone, making it feel a bit more of a serious affair compared to the previous game, and it feels like an improvement over the intro to Quest for Hikari. Back to the game itself. Rance hears everything about the situation from the mayor of Custard and agrees to save the town by defeating the 4 Rebellious Maidens. He does so after haggling as much reward money from the old guy as possible. Typical Rance behavior. After this introduction, you're free to go to locations around town. The main point of interest here is the item shop, run by a woman named Tomato Puree. The very same Tomato Puree that was on the cover of Rance 1. He finally gets a proper introduction as a silly shopkeeper. Her interactions with Rance here are cute and amusing. He ends all her sentences with question marks. He's quirky like that. Anyway, her shop is where you buy gear and medicine. You don't have to worry about buying new gear, as you'll soon find that money is a trivial concern. However, this does mark the introduction of the healing items of the Rance world, called Serogen, or Ibuprofen in the official English translation. Serogen is based on a real Japanese medicine, so it makes sense to change it to a Western equivalent for the translation. I think the main healing item being based on a real-world medicine adds to the absurdism and uniqueness of Rance's setting. It's like if in Final Fantasy, instead of high potions, characters took Advil when they're injured. Anyway, you'll be buying a lot of this medicine throughout the game because it's your most reliable source of healing. Aside from the item shop, it's also important to stop by Ragus' house. Rance and Sil encounter his ghost, and he'll reveal more information about himself and his 4 disciples. Apparently, they stole his feel rings, which is the reason they were able to overpower him. I think his interactions with Rance here are pretty amusing because he's a very serious character. And there's Rance being his usual dickhead self. There are a couple other locations like the info shop run by the Yoshikawa sisters, the cutest girls that are in town right now. Despite their cuteness, they don't get any H scenes unfortunately. There's a church run by the ungodly nun, Rose. Rose is a little odd, but she can fully heal you for free. After looking around and talking to people, you can enter the mouth of hell and enter the dungeon. I can finally talk about the gameplay in dungeon exploring. You'll be spending a majority of your time fighting enemies and trying to get through this dungeon. The battle system of this game is as basic as it gets. Every turn you can attack, use an item, or rest. You can also badmouth the enemy, which doesn't do anything. I think it's very characteristic of Rance to suddenly start mocking his enemy during battle. Essentially, you want to use your special attack, Rance Attack, as often as possible. This is the introduction of Rance Attack to the series, which will be Rance's special move that deals tons of damage in practically every game going forward. The biggest problem with battles is the stamina gauge. Every time you attack, it'll get lower, and using the Rance Attack will deplete it an even greater amount. When it gets too low, or reaches 0, you have to spend a turn resting, which will restore a small amount. It's such an annoying thing to manage. You'll usually spend a couple turns every battle resting, which just makes it feel like battles drag on longer than they should. It doesn't help how often Rance seems to miss in this game, which will make the stamina spent completely wasted. Even after battle, your stamina is not restored, so you have to go into camp and rest. It's a small thing, but having to do this after practically every battle so you're ready for the next enemy is a major annoyance. Due to how basic the battle system is, you'll just be spamming attacks until having to rest or heal. There's no real strategy to it, even during boss fights. It's not too different from the battle system of the original Rance 1, but that game didn't have the annoying stamina system and was much shorter. The one neat thing about battles is that you have party members this time. Rance only got help from Sil at the end of Rance 1, but now she's here to stay. Party members act on their own. You don't control them, so what they do may seem random. Party members will at least often heal Rance when he's at low health. Usually, they'll simply attack and rest when they need to. Occasionally, they'll get themselves killed because they neglect healing themselves. This can be annoying, because you get a game over if anyone in the party dies. It doesn't happen that often as long as you pay attention to everyone's health, and heal when it starts getting low. I think party members are pretty helpful overall. They can deal decent damage, and you don't have to worry about them too much. Occasionally, after battle you'll get to open a treasure chest. These chests are booby-trapped, but fortunately Sil is smart enough to figure out what kind of trap is being used, which lets you avoid it and get the treasure. It feels like Sil's correct 99% of the time, which makes me wonder why they even bothered with the traps. In my multiple playthroughs of the game, I think she was only wrong once. It's a weird test to see if you're paying attention, because the gameplay is otherwise boring enough to put the audience to sleep. What's really funny is the treasure you get from these chests. They can be anything, from some gold, to the best equipment from the item shop. You can randomly get the best equipment, which saves you the trouble of buying it. You can level up from the camp by summoning the level goddess Willis. I recognize Willis from 0-1, but now she's a goddess because she got that promotion. The dungeons themselves are pretty straightforward, but there are some puzzle elements that require backtracking. There's a lot of backtracking. Many times you'll have to walk all the way back to town to get something to progress in the dungeon. The encounter rate is fairly high, so you'll be fighting a monster every few steps, which can get annoying. For example, in the first dungeon, you need to exit it and go to a bar to order food. This will somehow give you a potion you need to find a key in the dungeon and progress. There's a lot of weird backtracking like that. Back to this story, Rance soon finds that the one governing this part of the dungeon is Maria Custard, who will go on to be one of the most recurring characters in the series. Of course, she has glasses because that's Tada's fetish. Here, she's the first of the rebellious maidens that Rance has to defeat. It's interesting to see Maria use magic in her boss fight, because you'll never see her use magic in the series again. You can easily forget she was originally a mage. Even Ragus states that she has more talent with science than with magic. When you first encounter her, she's doing science experiments and thinks that Rance and Sil want to be her assistants. After Rance beats her, he sexually assaults her, which in this case turns out to be the right thing to do. It's revealed that the Feel rings can only be worn by virgins, so by deflowering her, it ends up freeing her from the ring's control. The truth of the conflict between the four witches and Ragus is that he actually gave them the rings beforehand. It was part of his scheme. The rings are actually intended to drain the magic of the wearer. He's collecting these powered up rings to gain power. The girls caught on to his plan and rebelled against him. These rings also have a side effect of warping the personality of the wearer, which is why Maria acted like an arrogant sociopath before. Now Rance has an excuse to get laid and be somewhat morally justified, His objective is now clear: find the remaining 3 witches and free them of the ring's control. Another important thing about this ending scene is Sil. He tries to get Rance to stop assaulting Maria, which causes Rance to get angry and tell her to wait outside. He does this out of jealousy, and she starts questioning how Rance sees her. Is she someone that Rance loves, or merely his slave? He obviously cares greatly about him. He has no qualms of sleeping around with other women constantly. Rance too makes an attempt at exploring their relationship. In the first game, they're mostly separated, with Sil doing her undercover schoolgirl thing, while Rance does his own investigation. The sequel now tries to show what their characters mean to each other. We know that Sil is Rance's slave, but how much does he really care about her? This is still pretty early into the relationship and adventures, so it makes sense for her to start questioning these things. The first chapter does a wonderful job showcasing their dynamic, with a lot of funny banter between them. Rance can come across as a bit mean, but it's more him being playful or childish, rather than him being malicious. While Sil is left alone, he's suddenly spirited away by some magical force into a deeper part of the dungeon. Rance seems distraught by this, but she says it's because she was the one carrying around all the gold. Thus ends Chapter 1. One final thing of note is the HC music. This is the first time the series features My Glorious Days, which goes on to essentially become Rance's theme song. An interesting bit of trivia is that it's also the East Germany anthem. This is because the composer, Dragon Attack, was looking through references, thought it was pretty cool, and decided to build on it, not knowing its origin. This is even funnier knowing that East Germany still existed at the time of the original Rance 2. It's a great theme song that embodies the triumph Rance feels during these H scenes. The name My Glorious Days says a lot in itself. Rance is happiest when he's going on adventures and having sex. These encounters are what he sees as glorious moments. On to Chapter 2. With Sil gone, Maria is Rance's companion for this chapter. He's determined to save her friends from the ring's influence, and redeem herself for all the stuff she did before. He has a distinctly different relationship with Rance compared to Sil, which is interesting. Rance does try to treat Maria as a replacement slave while Sil's absent, but Maria isn't quite as submissive. She'll call Rance out and acting like a villain or a pervert. For example, Rance can have sex with Sil at practically any time, but Maria will tell Rance no. He still doesn't get swept up into his nonsense on occasion, albeit reluctantly. Maria's relationship with Rance is interesting, as her opinion of him changes as the series goes on. She has a high impression of him in this game because of everything he does to save Custard and her friends. This opinion of him will only get higher in the sequel and 4. However, starting with 6, her feelings towards him very slowly go downward as she realizes Rance's flaws. Unfortunately, you can't confront Ragus' ghost with Maria. He's nowhere to be found, and Maria will voice her frustration about this. Meanwhile, the mayor's daughter has gone missing. Totally unrelated, surely. Also, Rance wasn't joking about Sil having all his money. He thought this chapter broke, but that's not a major problem because of how trivial money is. This chapter marks Maria getting her Tulip 1, which will be her main weapon going forward. It's like a fantasy bazooka. At this point, she's completely abandoned magecraft, as I suppose the ring absorbed all her magic power anyway. Now she's Maria the super scientist. Her Tulip needs a special ore to work. You quickly find some in the dungeon. When she is able to fight, she hits like a truck. The Tulip is no joke, probably much stronger now than she ever was weaving spells. Aside from these developments, the chapter is otherwise pretty unremarkable. You explore more of the dungeon, and there's some shenanigans of a photographer. I'd say the highlight of this chapter is seeing all the Maria and Rance interactions. Maria herself is extremely cute. It's easy to see why she became a mainstay. This chapter ends with Rance and Maria saving a woman named Millie Yorks. Millie is the elder sister of Mill, another one of the 4 witches and the one that rules this part of the dungeon. She was trying to knock some sense into her sister, but nearly got killed instead. Millie is one of the best and most underutilized characters in the series, unlike characters like Maria and Shizuka, who become massively important. Millie's only in this game, Rance 3, and Kichiko. Even her younger sister gets more appearances than she does. There's a reason for this, but we'll get to that much later. In terms of personality, she's like a gender-bent Rance. She loves adventure and sex. She might not be the strongest with a level cap of 28, but she does decent enough to get by. She's also bisexual, which is interesting considering that Rance 2 was made in 1990. She might be one of the first openly bisexual characters in a JRPG. Onward to Chapter 3. For the first time in the series, the perspective shifts to someone besides Rance. We get a chapter to check in and see what Sil's doing. Because of magic, she was teleported into a deeper part of the dungeon. He soon finds another adventurer named Bird Lithfey. Bird is quite the polarizing character, intentionally so. I'll do a more in-depth analysis of his character and role in the story later, but for now know that he's supposed to be a foil for Rance. Bird is supposed to be a more typical and virtuous fantasy hero, at least on the surface. He finds himself immediately smitten by Sil, which creates an awkward dynamic between the two. Her feelings for him are purely platonic. He keeps insisting on how much he loves and wants to save her. These chapters with Sil and Bird are my least favorite part of the game. Not because of Bird, I actually quite like him, rather because I miss Rance. I think the game makes you subconsciously compare Bird and Rance both narrative and in gameplay. Of course, Bird doesn't have the fun personality Rance does, but he's also not quite as useful in battle. He isn't terrible, he can dish out decent enough damage, but he doesn't have anything like a Rance attack that deals lots of damage. It feels like he will often get himself knocked out in battle too. You can't help but think, I wish Rance was here. During these chapters, it feels more like Sil is the one saving him, and getting them through the dungeon. She is the driving force here, with Bird being the assist, which is the reverse of her usual dynamic with Rance. He is the one with strong damaging spells and healing. In many situations in these chapters, Bird shows himself to be useless, like in this chapter when Sil is assaulted by a tentacle monster. Sil has to pull herself out of the situation and save Bird. It all goes to show how useful and resourceful Sil is, even without Rance. The dungeon in these chapters is this weird fleshy place that looks like it would be gross to be in. I don't like looking at it, and traversing is just as annoying. This place has some of the worst puzzles, and the constant back and forth being interrupted by monsters doesn't help. One thing that is really interesting about this dungeon is that you meet a girl named RC Julieta. It might feel random to have a little girl looking for candy here, but this character has significance to the lore. He's actually the Apostle of Berksham, the villain from Little Vampire. I doubt this connection was originally planned, or rather something added later to connect her to the wider world. I think it's cool that such a random character is given great importance later, which happens a few times in the series. Anyway, the duo of Sil and Bird make their way through the dungeon, rescuing women that are being tormented by monsters along the way. Eventually, you find out this part of the dungeon is ruled by Eleonora Ran. He's another character that's somewhat underutilized in the series. With how massive the cast gets, it's kind of understandable. I don't think she's quite as cool as Millie, so I don't mind, but she can be kinda cool when she does show up. Here, she's one of the main antagonists, a woman that's known for being proficient in magecraft and swordplay. Not much else happens in this chapter, it's a lot like the previous one, except exploring the weird relationship that develops between Bird and Sil. Chapter 4, this is a weird one. We're back with Rance, and Millie has joined the party, bringing the total to 3. She's a great addition to the party, as her banter with Rance is a lot of fun. She's one of the few characters with a sex drive that can match Rance's, and she has some good H scenes. I also love the way she flirts with Maria and cheers her on with Rance while Maria has to do lewd things to entertain the mirrors. The trio explore the dungeon and eventually come across a mummy, like an actual Egyptian mummy. This is one of the most bizarre characters in the series. There's a lot of weird and goofy stuff in the continent, but the mummy sticks out to me as feeling like he doesn't fit in with the world or setting. You never see this character again or any other mummy, so it's really jarring. This part of the dungeon is modeled after an Egyptian pyramid, so I guess it fits in with the area theme at least. I mean, Africa kind of exists on the continent, but it's a part of Japan, and you never see pyramids or anything like Egypt there. They didn't have all the lore detailed out yet, and were probably just including stuff they thought would be funny. Rance 2's tone in general feels extremely silly a lot of the time, even compared to most other entries. The game has some fantastic character writing for Rance, Sil, Millie, Shizuka, and Bird. Yet will also break the fourth wall so often it almost takes me out of it. Characters like Tomato Puree will say, oh, it's an RPG and that's just how RPGs work. The series does poke fun at RPG tropes and has stuff that leans against the fourth wall, like the Alstoff office actually existing on the continent, but the characters in ZR2 will outright cut out the fact that they're in the game more than any other in this series. Again, I can forgive all the silliness and mummies, because this is still very early into the series, and a lot of what makes Rance a unique setting wasn't quite conceptualized yet. I think the goal of ZR2 is to make a fun RPG without thinking too much about the long-term ramifications. But the mummy was a bit too silly. This chapter does introduce other seemingly minor characters that will have huge effects on the series itself. The first of these is the devil girl that Rance accidentally summons. Devils are an important part of the continent, they are probably the most important in Toshin Toshi too. Her direction here sets up the existence of devils in the world. It's kind of like a genie and offers Rance 3 wishes in exchange for his soul. In typical Rance fashion, he wishes for sex, until the last wish where he backs out of having to exchange his soul. Rance can get blinded by lust, but he isn't that dumb. This scene may just seem like an excuse for sex, but it's extremely important to the rest of the series. This is the beginning of that poor devil girl's downward spiral. The other character that's introduced here is King Dragon, or KD for short. He's exactly what his name implies, and he looks like a cat. He occasionally shows up in the series to ask trivia questions in exchange for treasure, like an annoying Riddler. His appearance and role in the series may seem very silly, but he's one of the most tragic characters in the series. He's one of the oldest living beings on the continent, even creating world peace for a limited time, only to see it all crumble down because of him. He understands the absurdity of the world and the meaningless cycle of conflict that keeps it afloat. This made him detach himself from the world, acting as a goofy quiz guy to cope with his trauma. He's a fascinating character, whose role in the lore is only vaguely alluded to in the games. It's only delved in depth in interviews and lore books. I do wonder how much of his character was planned out at this stage, or if they would include him just because they thought it was funny. It really is impossible to tell. One final interesting thing about this chapter is that there's a boss fight against a giant golden handy. It's one of the cooler boss fights in the game. As you deplete their health, you destroy the body until you're fighting the head. Golden handies are also significant to the continent at large. They are the source of all the gold that's used as currency. They are defeated by adventurers and taken to Hanawa Mint to be turned into gold coins. Getting back on track with the main plot, this is Mil's dungeon. He specializes in summoning magic. When the party first tries to confront her, they're easily repelled as they find that their attacks are completely ineffective against her summons. This causes the group to search for a way to damage these summons, eventually finding a sword that works, but it can only be wielded by the delicate touch of a lesbian, by which I mean Millie. With this new weapon, the party can finally properly fend off Mil's beast, which starts the most egregious example of the game wasting the player's time. Well, this game has a lot of backtracking, but this particular section is infuriating. Because Millie is the one with the sword, only she can damage these beasts, which makes Rance and Maria completely useless. Narratively, I think this is a really cool idea. Millie is Mil's sister. She has the most personal motivation for wanting to confront her and put an end to her cruelty. As her family, she has to be the one to put an end to it. However, the problem is that you're still playing as Rance. You can do nothing during these battles. You're just waiting around for Millie to defeat the enemy, healing her when you need to. This might not be too bad if there was only one of these fights, but there are several. The worst part is that you can't even go into the camp to rest because of the enemies immediately respond when you do. So Millie will constantly be on low stamina, which makes the battles drag on even longer. These battles are so boring you can't really fight the enemies, so you're instead fighting to stay awake. Once Millie does defeat all the phantom beasts, you can finally confront Mil, who is now defenseless without them. He tries bargaining with her sister, saying that they should live together in the dungeon, and to hell with the people of custom. Rance picks up on how Mil still loves her sister, even with the ring's influence, and thinks use Millie as a hostage to get her sister to surrender. Another great Rance moment. He's unpredictable, even to his allies. Rance has his way with Mil, causing her to be freed from the Feel Ring's clutches. And one of the most infamous gags in the game is the reveal that Mil is actually much younger than she initially appeared, being only 9 years old. This horrifies Rance. While he is a lecherous person, he has standards, and doing it with a kid is something he finds reprehensible. The ring's power made her power up into an adult form. This twist is foreshadowed, and it does explain Mil's childish attitude. On to Chapter 5, we're back with Sil and Bird. This is the last chapter we'll be seeing Bird in the game, so let's talk about him. Bird is a fascinating and complex character that might be one of my favorites in the series. Like I said before, Bird is a kind of foil to Rance. He acts as more of a typical altruistic hero. At least, that's how he presents himself on the surface. Deep down, he's not that different from Rance. He's a womanizer that will fall for practically any cute girl he meets. Like with Sil, he immediately professes his love for her after meeting her. He even tries to propose to her. However, while he claims to love her, he also objectifies her. He doesn't exactly see her for who she is, but rather for who he wants her to be. He sees her as a poor slave girl that he can rescue and then have sex with. Anytime that Sil does try to set the record straight and explain that she loves Rance, Bird either brushes her off or ignores her. He convinces himself that she only says such things out of fear of her master, and refuses to accept that he might be wrong. He can act rather pushy in trying to get Sil to love him. Furthermore, Bird is also just a hypocrite. In this game and others, Bird will call out Rance for being a womanizing scumbag, but Bird isn't much different. In this very game, he was in a relationship before meeting Sil. His girlfriend is a girl Rance encounters in the dungeon in Chapter 1. Her name is Nei Oolong. Rance can either help or rape her. Anyway, Bird immediately forgets all about Nei once he sees Sil. Knowing that he's supposed to be in a relationship with another girl, puts his relationship with Sil in these chapters in a much worse light. One of the girls in the information shop, Kyoko, is infatuated with Bird as well. I think the biggest difference between Rance and Bird is that while Bird puts on the persona of a nice guy to win over girls, Rance is unashamedly himself. Rance comes across as more genuine because he is true to his desires. While he may occasionally use lies or tricks to get with women, he doesn't ever deny that he wants sex. He also sincerely cares for the women that are with him, though he can be a massive tsundere. He He'll move mountains and do the impossible to make those he cares for happy. Bird helps women so he can be viewed as a hero, but abandon them whenever someone cute catches his eye. Bird is in denial of himself, unable to be honest about his true feelings, so he feels jealous of Rance. Rance acts on his hedonistic desires and is rewarded for it, while Bird is constantly punished for not being true to himself. Bird could never accomplish as much as Rance, and it's not purely due to his strength. In this very game, Rance is able to save the rebellious maidens from the ring's corruption, only because he acted on his perverse desires upon beating Maria. Bird would never do that, so even if he could win, he'd just end up killing the girls. Bird could never be the hero that saves Custard. In short, Bird is a tragic and pathetic man, while Rance is a hero beloved by all. At the end of the chapter, Rance and Sil are reunited, while Bird proves himself to be useless again as he's easily disarmed by Ran. Rance and Sil meeting up again is a really cute scene, and I enjoy Rance suddenly dashing into the chapter like a real hero. Sil reaffirms that she is with Rance not because she's his slave, but because she loves him. Rance's confrontation with Bird is one of the best scenes in the game. Bird tries to call out Rance on his treatment of Sil, but instead gets called out for not understanding Sil at all. He points out how Sil immediately came to him after beating Ran, not to Bird. Rance may be a brute and a fool at times, but he can be sharp at times like this. This just proves that he knows Sil better than anyone. Despite being known for being violent towards men, Rance doesn't bother killing Bird here, instead telling him to get lost. He isn't worth getting Rance's sword dirty. It's a great conclusion to the Bird and Sil plotline. Chapter 6 is the final chapter of the game. Rance and Sil are finally reunited and are going to end this adventure together. Maria and Millie have left the party to do their own thing. We're back to how it started. With most of the rebellious witches dealt with at this point, the magic keeping the town underground has gone away. You can go around Custard to see how they've been rebuilding. Maria is leading the construction. Millie and Mill are now running a drugstore, and Ran is handling political stuff of getting aid from Lazis. All three of them are doing their best to atone for their harm they caused under the influence of the fuel rings. Found out that Bird left Custard in pursuit of Kyoko. I guess she's to rebound now that he's been rejected by Sil. There's also a cool scene here connecting it to the previous game. Princess Leah, Maris, and the mysterious ninja girl are waiting in the bar. Leah still wants to marry Rance, much to his annoyance because he doesn't want to be tied down to one woman. Leah gives Rance the holy sword and holy armor, the best equipment in the game for him. I love the presence of these characters here, as it shows the consequences of Rance's previous adventure, while showing how interconnected the world is early on. Characters from previous games can show up like this when you least expect it. With all that done, it's time to enter the final dungeon and put an end to all this. First, let's talk about one of the big differences between the original and 02, which is the grinding. 02 added more optional grinding to the endgame here. There's an HT of the level goddess Willis if you can get Rance to level 40. You see her slowly stripping his level up, something that happens in many later games that was added in the remake. To supplement this, the remake added enemies that exist simply to give out lots of experience and grind. Like this sack girl that has high evasion and high chance of running away. This enemy is super annoying because she will waste your time by running away in the middle of the battle. Getting to level 40 takes forever, even with these new enemies. Other girls also have little side quests you have to do to get their H scenes, like finding a mimic for Tomato, but Willis's H scene is the hardest to get purely because of how tedious the grinding is. The scene itself isn't particularly memorable, so it doesn't feel worth it unless you're a completionist like me. You'll also understandably refuse to level up Rance after he assaults her, which doesn't matter because at level 40 you can easily steamroll everything. Anyway, Rance and Sil go through the dungeon, defeating a succubus along the way. One cool thing about the very end here is the first time the Stone Guardians are in the series. While 01 added them in the end, they weren't present in the original first game and make their debut here. You'll see them a lot throughout the series as tough endgame enemies. Their super tanking can deal a ton of damage. There's still no match for Rance at level 40. It's at the end here that you finally find out Shizuka's goal. He's been having girls from Custom abducted and used to fuel her magical time portal. This is a powerful magic that wouldn't be possible with the fuel ring and all these girls as fuel. Rance and Sil follow through the time portal and confront Shizuka. Shizuka Maso is the last of the witches of Custom. He's said to be the most talented of them and a force to be reckoned with, even without the fuel ring. He's one of the most popular characters in the series, and with good reason. He's extremely well written, likable, and cool as hell. Plus I love the big witch hat. He's one of the few characters that's more realistic reaction being assaulted by Rance, though she hates him for it. Her dislike for Rance is also compounded by her concern for her best friend, Maria, who's completely infatuated with him throughout most of the series. So Shizuka ends up going on adventures with Rance, despite hating him, all for Maria's sake. He's the best antagonist in this game, with a sympathetic motivation. She used all the women from Custom to create a way to travel to the past to save her father from being killed. He's just a girl that misses her father. One of the most interesting writing decisions regarding the fuel rings is how it warps the girl's sense of morality, but doesn't change their nature. This was shown with Mill and how she still loved her sister, immediately surrendering when Millie was taken hostage. With Shizuka, saving her father is something she has always wanted. It's something she even attempts again in later games. The ring just makes it so that she's willing to use human sacrifices. She is aware of how the ring is affecting her, but allows it to if it helps her achieve her goal. I have to wonder if the way she acted in this game, and the way she used her friends to serve her own goals, is something that she felt immense guilt over later, which is why she's so protective of Maria. We find out more about her father in later games, but for now the circumstances leading to his death are a mystery. Rance doesn't know about what she wants, nor does he seem to care. He's here to have sex and save Custom. The battle against Shizuka is the same as the other boss fights in the game, but there's one amazing detail here. Remember how I said the badmouth option in battle was useless? That wasn't completely true, as this is the only battle where it has a use. Rance can badmouth Shizuka, and she's so short-tempered that it lowers her defense as she goes all out in killing Rance. I love little character quirks like that being reflected in gameplay. Once Rance beats her, he assaults her, in the saddest H scene in the game. She cries about how much she misses her father the whole time. It's easy to see why she holds a massive grudge against him for the most of the series after he ruined her chance to save him, and possibly improve her life. Yet altering time like this usually has negative effects, so maybe Rance stopping her here was for the best. With Shizuka freed from the Feel Ring, Rance's quest is done. A celebration is held in Custom, with all the Rebellious Maidens in attendance. Afterwards, Rance takes the mayor's daughter to his bed, only to find out that she has been possessed by Ragus' ghost. This is foreshadowed with how she disappeared, then reappeared in a later chapter in Ragus' house. He takes the Feel Rings from Rance, now fully powered with the magic from all 4 girls. He believes he will be invincible. Rance, Sil, and the 4 witches, plus Millie, all team up to take him down. Side note, but I adore how Shizuka bites Rance's hand here. She despises him and does not want to work with him, but understands that she'll need all the help she can get to defeat a fully powered Ragus. Ragus is the true antagonist of the game, though he is fairly one-note once his true nature as a power-hungry mage is revealed. If anything, I feel bad for the 4 girls. As to them, he's not merely a mentor, but also a father figure. He adopted the 4 orphans upon understanding their magic potential. It was all part of his evil scheme to gain power, but the opening movie does briefly show the girls happy with Ragus until they find out about his plan. While he is fairly one-note, he's important in that he serves as a thematic prelude to what we'll see later with Nagi and her relationship with her father. Shizuka and Nagi are given these parallels, especially in regards to shitty father figures. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I'll talk about that more once we get to Rance 6. Just know that Ragus is the foundation of the theme of being betrayed by a parental figure. The battle against him is a neat spectacle as he transforms into more of a monster as the battle goes on. Even with the support of Shizuka and the Tulip too, he will not go down. The battle ends with Shizuka and Rance knocked out, and Rance is backed into a corner. Rance is on the cusp of defeat, but refuses to give in, which is the coolest serious scene in the game. Then suddenly Ragus dies as he's about to win. This is because he couldn't control the magical energy and explodes. This is an abrupt and bizarre way to end the game. It feels kind of anticlimactic, like there should have been another phase where Rance fights him one-on-one or something. I suppose that Rance is a parody of JRPGs, so the final boss dying right before there seems to be another phase kind of plays with the audience's expectations. Rance winning due to his luck is like him. Well, if Ragus is dead, the spirits of the girls trapped in the Feel Rings are released. The game ends with Rance having a massive orgy with all of them. Typical Rance. Closing thoughts on Rance 02. It's an odd game in the series, and one I don't particularly like. The combat gets stale way before its end, and there's too much that feels designed to waste the player's time. However, it is an integral part of the series. It introduces multiple important and beloved characters, like Shizuka, Maria, Millie, and Bird. It may feel disappointing if coming after 01, as it is an HD version of a game from 1990. If you were to compare the original 2 to the original Rance 1, then it makes a bit more sense and feels like a natural evolution. It builds upon the gameplay by giving you party members, and has a somewhat bigger scale story about saving a town. I may criticize many aspects of the gameplay, but I think Rance's characterization here is on point. It's the first time he truly feels like Rance, at least in the original games. In 2, he feels like the arrogant, selfish bastard that you can't help but love. As far as 02 versus the original 2 goes, I say that 02 is the best way to play it, despite the added grinding. The original's art has its charm, but 02 does look better while having the same gameplay, although the art for 02 does look kinda odd sometimes. I do not like Rance's horny sprite. The way his nose disappears is uncanny and disturbing. The CGs look wonderful though. I think that analyzing Rance 2 so deeply has given me a greater appreciation for it. It may be my least favorite, but it's an integral part of the series. The games will only get better from here. The H scene of the game is Millie's Yuri scene with Maria. I like Yuri. And Millie. That's the end of another one of Rance's adventures. Next time I'll talk about Rance 3, The Fall of Lazus, which marks the start of Rance's first big adventure, and a lot of the world building that the series will be known for. I'm excited to talk about it, especially now that the remake is out, so hopefully it doesn't take me as long as this part. Thanks to my good friend Chestnut Rance for looking over the script. See you next time, viewers, and if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.